The night was quiet, but it was not peaceful. The silence of the forest was heavy, broken only by the soft creak of old trees and the whisper of wind that carried the smell of ash. The moon hung low, pale and sickly, casting long shadows across the ruined outpost. Once this place had been a human settlement, a wall of metal and stone standing tall against the wild. Now it was nothing but a skeleton, burned gates, collapsed towers and walls clawed apart by something too strong for steel. At the center of the ruins, a young woman knelt on the cold ground. Her hands were bound tightly with wire, her ankles scraped raw from struggling against chains hammered into the broken stones. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, her eyes wide as she tried to steady her breath. She could hear them. Not clearly, not yet. But the forest carried whispers, low growls, like a storm crawling on all fours, waiting for the right moment to strike. She was bait. She knew it. Earlier, before night fell, the other humans had left her there. She remembered the fear in their eyes as they shoved her into the center of the outpost and tied her down. They didn't even look at her when she begged. One man, his voice shaking, had whispered to another, "She'll keep them busy long enough, we'll escape." And then they were gone, boots pounding against the earth as they ran back toward the safety of the mountains. She had screamed after them until her throat burned. But no one turned back. Now she was alone. Alone and surrounded by shadows, the woman bit her lip hard enough to taste blood. She wanted to believe this was a nightmare. That she would wake up in her bed, hear the hum of the settlement's power generators and laugh at her own fear. But the cold stone under her knees was real. The stinging pain in her wrists was real. And the sounds, oh the sounds, were too sharp to be anything but real. A branch cracked somewhere in the dark. She froze, every muscle in her body tensing. Her eyes darted left, right, searching the black line of the forest. Nothing moved. Yet she could feel it, something was watching. The air grew heavier, colder. Even the wind seemed afraid to move. Then came the first growl. It rolled across the ruins like thunder. She shivered. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt, each beat echoing in her ears. Another growl answered from the opposite side. Then another, closer this time. The monsters were gathering, circling her like hungry sharks that smelled blood in the water. She pulled against the chains, the metal biting into her skin. "No, please," she whispered, but her voice broke into silence. For a brief moment she thought of running. If she pulled hard enough, maybe the wire would snap. If she crawled fast enough, maybe she could reach the broken wall before they struck. But even as the thought formed, she heard claws scrape stone. Slow, deliberate steps. They were already inside the outpost. Already closing in. The woman pressed her forehead against the cold chain and squeezed her eyes shut. Tears leaked out, but she didn't make a sound. If she screamed, it would only excite them. She had seen it before. Monsters that laughed at human fear, dragging victims away while their cries filled the night. She opened her eyes again, forcing herself to stare at the shadows. If this was the end, she wanted to face it, not hide. She wanted to see them, and then she did. From the dark line of the trees, a pair of glowing eyes appeared. Yellow. Burning. They blinked once, slow and cruel, before another set of eyes joined them. And another. Soon, half a dozen lights shimmered in the dark like lanterns, each one belonging to something massive. The monsters stepped forward, breaking the line of trees. Their bodies were thick and armored with jagged bone, their claws long enough to pierce steel. Their faces, if they could be called faces, were twisted into permanent snarls, teeth like rows of daggers dripping with saliva. The woman's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream but couldn't. Her voice had abandoned her. The beasts circled, moving slowly, savoring the fear. They growled at each other, deep sounds that shook her bones, communicating in a language humans could never understand. She was prey. That was all she was. Then the ground trembled. The biggest of them stepped forward. Taller than the rest, shoulders like stone walls, eyes burning brighter than fire. Its claws dragged against the stone as it moved, leaving deep scars in the earth. This was no ordinary monster. This was the Alpha. The pack froze, waiting. Even the other beasts respected its power. The woman could no longer breathe. She was nothing before it. She was nothing but meat, trembling and bound, offered like a gift to the monster's king. The Alpha lowered its head, sniffing the air. Its growl was so deep, the stones beneath her rattled. It opened its jaws, rows of teeth shining wet in the moonlight. She squeezed her eyes shut. This was it. This was the end. And then, a crash thundered through the ruins, stone shattered. Dust filled the air. Something heavy had hit the ground not far from her, shaking the earth under her knees. The monsters froze, their glowing eyes snapping toward the sound. The woman's heart leapt into her throat as her eyes shot open. Through the haze of dust and broken stone, a figure moved. Not a monster. The monsters arrived. The dust settled slowly, drifting in the moonlight like falling ash. The woman's eyes locked on the figure that had crashed into the ruins. For a moment, her heart dared to hope, but she quickly shook her head. No human could survive here. No human could fight them. The monsters stood frozen, their glowing eyes narrowed, uncertain. The pack had never seen anything fall from the sky that wasn't prey. Their growls deepened, echoing through the broken walls, filling the night with a sound like thunder rolling across a hollow canyon. The Alpha stepped forward, massive claws scraping the ground, its fangs bared. The woman trembled, chains rattling as she instinctively pressed herself back against the stone pillar that bound her. She wanted to scream at the figure, to tell them to run. Whoever they were, whatever they were doing here, they didn't understand. You couldn't fight these things. You couldn't even survive looking at them for too long. The figure stood tall in the dust, unmoving. A human silhouette, broad shoulders beneath battered armor, head slightly bowed. Slowly, deliberately, the stranger raised his head. The moonlight struck his face, scarred, tired, but eyes burning with something colder than the night. The monsters hissed in unison, the sound sharp and alien, like steam escaping from broken pipes. The Alpha growled low, a sound that made even the other beasts step back. This was its territory. This was its hunt. No human was allowed to challenge it. The woman's breath came in short, shaky bursts. She whispered under her breath, as if the words could anchor her to reality. A human, it's a human. The stranger finally moved. His hand lowered to the weapon at his side. A blade, long and jagged, its edge chipped and stained as if it had already tasted battles that should have killed its wielder. He didn't draw it yet. Instead, he planted his boots firmly on the ground, squared his shoulders, and stared straight into the Alpha's burning eyes. The forest went still. And then the Alpha charged at it was like a storm breaking loose. The ground shook under the monster's weight as it lunged forward, claws slicing through the air with enough force to shatter stone. The other beasts howled in excitement, their voices filling the night. The woman screamed, twisting against her chains, sure she was about to watch this lone human be torn apart in front of her. But the stranger didn't move. Not until the last second. Then, he vanished, the Alpha's claws slammed into stone, tearing through the pillar where he had stood. Dust and shards exploded outward. The woman coughed, eyes wide, searching the cloud for any sign of him. And then she saw it. The human had slipped past the Alpha with impossible speed. His blade flashed once, a silver arc in the moonlight, and carved across the Alpha's armored hide. The beast roared in pain and rage, stumbling back as black blood spilled onto the broken stones. The other monsters froze. For the first time, their snarls sounded uncertain. The woman couldn't believe what she was seeing. A human, just one man, had struck the Alpha. And lived. The stranger turned slowly, his blade dripping. His eyes never left the monsters, his stance calm, unshaken. It was as if this wasn't a fight, it was routine. The pack growled louder, furious at the insult to their Alpha. Their eyes locked on the stranger, their hunger shifting from the chained woman to him. To kill a human was pleasure. To kill this human would be glory. One of them broke first. A smaller beast, sleek and fast. It darted forward with blinding speed, jaws wide, saliva spraying as it aimed for the stranger's throat. The woman gasped. No. The stranger's hand moved like lightning. His blade rose in a perfect arc, and the creature's head snapped back as steel cut deep into its jaw. The beast shrieked, crashing to the ground in a heap of blood and bone. The others froze again. Their growls trembled. The Alpha roared, furious, refusing to allow fear to infect its pack. It bared its fangs, blood dripping from its wound, and raised its massive claws again. Its voice was a sound of pure hate, rattling the air, making the woman feel as if her heart might burst. The stranger lifted his blade. This time he spoke, his voice low, sharp, and unshaken. Come then. The woman's heart thundered in her chest. She didn't know who this man was. She didn't know where he came from. But in that moment, something inside her shifted. For the first time since she had been abandoned, chained, and left as food, she felt hope. The Alpha roared again and lunged forward, claws descending like a storm meant to crush the world. And the stranger moved to meet it. The stranger. The Alpha's roar split the night, shaking the walls of the ruined outpost. Its massive claws descended with the weight of a falling mountain, the ground trembling under its fury. Dust exploded outward as stone shattered, and for a moment the world seemed to break beneath its rage. But the stranger was already gone. He moved like smoke in a storm, slipping past the Alpha's strike with inhuman precision, boots whispering against broken stone. His blade carved the air in a blur, striking the alpha's leg. The cut wasn't deep enough to kill, but it was enough to stagger the beast, its roar twisting into a cry of pain. The pack howled in shock. Never had they seen their alpha hurt by prey. The woman's eyes widened. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she watched the human dance between monsters like he belonged to another world. He didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. It was as if he had fought creatures like these 100 times before. The alpha turned with impossible speed, claws sweeping through the air. The strike smashed through a broken wall, sending rubble flying. The woman screamed as stones crashed dangerously close to her. But when the dust cleared, the stranger still stood untouched, his blade raised, his eyes met the alpha's. Full, focused, unshaken. The alpha snarled, furious. This was not prey. This was not fear. This was something else. Something that looked human but fought like a predator born of the same darkness. Two of the smaller beasts rushed forward together, snapping jaws and swinging claws sharp enough to cut through armor. The stranger didn't retreat. He advanced. The first monster lunged. The stranger ducked low, his blade slicing clean across its chest. Black blood sprayed the ground as the creature collapsed with a guttural shriek. The second beast tried to strike from behind, but the stranger twisted with a movement too fast for human eyes. His elbow cracked against its jaw, breaking bone. Before his blade finished the job in a single ruthless strike, the woman gasped, her breath caught in her throat. She could hardly keep up with his movements. He fought with brutal efficiency, as if every motion was calculated, every strike meant to kill. He wasn't just surviving. He was dominating. The remaining monsters circled uneasily. Their snarls were filled with confusion, their glowing eyes flicking between their alpha and the stranger. They were predators bred for terror, but now for the first time they tasted fear themselves. The alpha roared again, furious at the hesitation of its pack. Its voice commanded obedience, demanded blood. The beasts howled in answer, their hesitation burning away. Together they charged. The woman screamed. There were too many. Even this stranger, this impossible warrior, couldn't fight them all. But the human only lowered his stance, planting his feet firmly, his blade raised high. His voice cut through the chaos, low, calm, and terrifying in its certainty. Come. The first beast lunged. The stranger spun, blade flashing, and its head fell before its body even hit the ground. Another leapt, claws stretched wide. He caught its arm, twisted, and snapped bone before driving his blade through its chest. A third monster clawed at his back, but he dropped low, dragging his blade upward in a brutal arc that tore the creature in half. The ruins became a storm of screams and steel. The woman couldn't breathe. Her eyes darted between blood and shadow, her ears ringing with the sound of monsters shrieking in agony. The stranger didn't falter. Every strike was final. Every movement was ruthless. He fought like a man who had no fear of death, no hesitation, no weakness, and then silence. The ground was littered with broken bodies. The surviving beasts pulled back, snarling, uncertain whether to obey the alpha's command or save themselves. The alpha stood tall, its glowing eyes locked on the stranger. Rage burned hotter than fire in its chest. It had never been wounded, never been challenged. And now this single human had cut it, humiliated it, slaughtered its pack before its eyes. The alpha roared, a sound of pure fury that cracked the air like thunder. The ruins shook. The woman clamped her hands over her ears, chains rattling, her heart racing so hard she thought it would burst. The stranger didn't flinch. For the first time, he spoke clearly, his voice steady, carrying across the ruins like a blade of its own. I didn't come here for them. The alpha froze. The woman stared, her lips trembling. If not for them, then why? The stranger's eyes turned just for a moment toward her. And in that glance, the woman understood something terrifying. He hadn't come here to hunt monsters. He had come here, for her. The alpha roared and charged, the earth splitting beneath its weight. The stranger raised his blade, his stance unshaken, and stepped forward to meet the fury of the monster's king. The night exploded into battle once more. The first clash, the alpha's charge was like a natural disaster, raw, unstoppable force. Stones split under its claws, rubble scattered as its massive body thundered across the ruins. Its roar rattled the air, a sound so deep it vibrated through bone. No human should have stood before it. No human had ever dared, but the stranger did that. He didn't step back. He didn't even flinch. He leaned forward, blade angled low, eyes locked on the monster with the cold patience of a predator waiting for the perfect strike. The woman screamed, straining against her chains as the alpha's shadow swallowed the stranger whole. She couldn't watch, her heart clenched so tight she thought it would burst. And then, Impact, the Alpha's claws swept down like a guillotine. The stranger met them with his blade. Steel clashed against bone with an explosion of sparks, the sound sharp enough to split the air. The ground shook under the collision, cracks spider-webbing through the stone where his boots dug in. The woman's eyes widened. He hadn't been crushed. He was holding it back. The Alpha roared in fury, pressing down with its full weight. Its claws screeched against the stranger's blade, sparks showering the ruins. Its strength was overwhelming, enough to tear tanks apart, to bring down walls of steel. But the human did not break. His arms trembled, muscles straining, yet his stance held firm, like he had been born for this very moment. The beasts that remained circled the edges of the ruins, their glowing eyes wide with something almost unthinkable for them: hesitation. They had seen their Alpha destroy everything in its path. They had never seen anything survive its wrath. Until now. The stranger growled low in his throat, a sound not unlike the beasts themselves. And then, with a sudden surge of force, he pushed back. The Alpha stumbled a step, its claws sliding off the blade. The woman gasped. He hadn't just resisted the Alpha, he had forced it back. The Alpha snarled and raged and lashed out again. Its claw swept sideways, smashing through a wall of stone like paper. The stranger ducked low, the strike missing by inches, and spun with blinding speed. His blade cut across the monster's chest, leaving a jagged line of black blood that sprayed across the ground. The Alpha staggered back with a roar of pain, its glowing eyes burning hotter with hate. The stranger didn't give it time. He charged forward, blade flashing, and struck again. The Alpha raised an arm to block, but the blade carved through flesh and bone, biting deep. The monster shrieked, swinging wildly in retaliation. The ruins became chaos, dust, blood, and broken stone flying in every direction. Every clash shook the air, every strike rang like thunder. The woman's ears rang with the sound, her heart hammering with terror and awe. This wasn't a battle between prey and predator. This was a war between kings. The Alpha bellowed, snapping its jaws wide, and lunged forward to bite. Its teeth, each longer than a man's hand, clamped down toward the stranger's head. At the last second, the human shoved his blade upward. Steel mit Fing. The Alpha's jaws clamped down, and steel split teeth apart. Shards of ivory scattered across the ground as the Alpha howled in rage, its blood spraying hot across the stranger's face. That he didn't blink. The woman's breath caught. He wasn't human, not truly. No human could fight like this. No human could survive this. Yet here he was, standing against a nightmare and refusing to fall. The Alpha reared back, its massive tail whipping through the air. The strike was fast, too fast for something so big. The tail smashed into the ground where the stranger had stood, the impact cratering the stone. Dust exploded outward, covering everything in shadow. For a terrifying heartbeat, the woman thought he had been crushed. Her chest tightened, eyes wide, tears streaking her face as she whispered, "No." And then through the dust he emerged, charging. That he moved faster than the eye could follow, leaping onto the Alpha's arm as it lifted from the rubble. His boots found footing in the monster's jagged armor, and he sprinted upward as if climbing a collapsing tower. The Alpha roared in fury, swiping at him with its other claw, but he was already there, blade raised high. With a roar of his own, the stranger drove his blade into the Alpha's shoulder. The scream that followed shook the night for miles. The Alpha thrashed, its massive body slamming against the ruins, trying to shake him free. Walls collapsed. Debris rained down. The woman ducked as stone crashed around her, her chains the only thing keeping her from being buried alive. Still, the stranger held on. His blade twisted deeper, black blood gushing across the ruins. The Alpha slammed its body against the ground, the impact like an earthquake. The stranger was thrown clear, crashing into rubble with enough force to crush any ordinary man. The woman cried out, fear tearing through her chest. Dust billowed, hiding him from view. The Alpha staggered, roaring in fury, blood pouring from its wound. It turned toward the rubble where the stranger had fallen, its glowing eyes narrowing. Slowly, it stepped forward, every heavy stomp echoing like a death drum. The ruins fell silent, save for the sound of the Alpha's growl. The beasts waited, holding their breath, their glowing eyes fixed on the dust. The woman's chains rattled as she strained forward, desperate to see. And then, the dust shifted, the stranger rose, blood streaked his face. His armor was cracked. His blade was jagged, dripping black. But his eyes still burned with that same cold fire. The Alpha froze. For the first time, the king of monsters hesitated. The stranger raised his blade once more. His voice cut through the silence, calm and merciless. You bleed. You can die. And then he charged. The impossible fight. The Alpha's roar rolled through the ruins, shaking stone and sky. Its blood still poured from the wound the stranger had carved into its shoulder, but its fury burned hotter than pain. The monsters circling the battlefield growled in unison, their glowing eyes locked on the lone human who stood defiant, blade dripping black. The woman's breath came in broken gasps. Her chains rattled as she pulled helplessly, her body trembling not only from fear, but from disbelief. She had seen humans die screaming against these beasts. She had seen whole squads ripped apart in seconds. And yet here stood one man, bloodied and broken, but unshaken. The Alpha's claws dug into the earth, gouging deep trenches. Its growl grew into a roar, and with a violent command, it sent its pack forward. The ruins erupted. The first monster sprinted low, its armored body blurring with speed. Another leapt from the rubble, claws gleaming. A third circled from behind, jaws wide, ready to tear the human apart. The woman screamed, "Behind you!" But the stranger didn't need the warning. He spun. His blade caught the first monster in the gut, cutting it clean open. Even as black blood sprayed, he kicked its body aside and ducked under the second. His blade whipped upward in a brutal arc, tearing through the creature's throat. It collapsed with a choking snarl, thrashing as it drowned in its own blood. The third monster lunged from behind, its claws aiming for his spine. The stranger twisted, catching the strike with his blade. Sparks erupted as steel met bone. With his other hand he reached out, grabbed the beast's jaw and wrenched. The sound of cracking bone filled the ruins. The beast collapsed, twitching, its head bent at an impossible angle. The woman gasped, her heart pounding. This wasn't survival anymore. This was slaughter. The other beasts hesitated. Their growls faltered, claws scraping nervously against stone. Something was wrong. Something was unnatural. For the first time they weren't the hunters. The stranger turned slowly, his blade dripping, his eyes scanning the pack like a predator choosing its next kill. His chest rose and fell with steady breaths, as if the fight wasn't wearing him down at all. He lifted the blade, blood glinting in the moonlight, and beckoned them forward with a flick of his wrist. The beast hissed, furious but uncertain. The Alpha roared again, demanding they obey, and so they came. 5 at once. The ruins became chaos. Claws and teeth closed in from all directions. The stranger was swallowed by a storm of snapping jaws and tearing strikes. The woman cried out, straining against her chains, her voice breaking. Dust and blood filled the air. But then, the storm broke. A body flew. Then another. One beast crashed against the wall, spine snapping. Another's head rolled across the ground, eyes still glowing faintly before fading out. The others writhed in agony, their screams filling the night. The stranger emerged from the chaos, his blade jagged, his armor soaked in black blood. His face was cut, blood dripping into his eye, but he didn't falter. The woman's lips parted in shock. It was impossible. No man could fight like this. No man should even be standing. Yet he moved with the same cold, ruthless precision, like he wasn't fighting for survival. Like he was the executioner and they were already condemned. The Alpha snarled, furious at the carnage. It pounded its claws into the ground, cracking stone, its roar shaking the ruins, but the pack, what was left of it, did not move. They had seen too much. They had felt fear for the first time. The woman's eyes darted between the monsters. Their glowing eyes no longer burned with hunger. They flickered with something far more human, hesitation. The stranger raised his blade again, his voice cutting through the silence, low and sharp. You bleed. You die. Just like everything else. The beasts hissed, but they didn't advance. Some even stepped back, their bodies low, their snarls trembling. The Alpha roared again, enraged, but the sound no longer carried the same weight. It was no longer a king commanding its army. It was a tyrant screaming at deserters. The woman felt a strange shiver run through her chest. For the first time in her life, she saw monsters afraid. The Alpha charged, refusing to allow weakness in its pack. Its massive body tore through stone, its claws raised high, its jaws snapping. The stranger braced, his blade ready. The impact shook the ruins like an earthquake. The woman screamed as rubble fell, the chain biting into her wrists as she ducked. The Alpha's claws slashed wildly, its fury overwhelming, its body a blur of violence. The stranger matched it, steel clashed against bone. Sparks lit the night. Black blood rained across the ruins. Each strike shook the ground, each clash louder than thunder. The Alpha bit down, its teeth clamping around the stranger's blade. The steel bent, groaned, but held. With a roar, the human twisted, driving the jagged edge through the beast's mouth, tearing its jaw apart. The Alpha shrieked in fury, slamming its tail into the ground. The shockwave hurled the stranger back, smashing him into rubble. The woman cried out, eyes wide, fear tearing through her chest. The Alpha panted, its glowing eyes wild, blood pouring from its wounds. It turned toward the rubble where the stranger had fallen. Slowly it stepped forward, claws digging into stone. Its roar shook the air, half triumph, half fury, but then, the rubble shifted, the stranger rose once more, staggering, his blade broken into jagged steel, but his eyes still burned with fire. The Alpha froze, the woman's voice cracked as she whispered the words that hung heavy in the air. He's not human. The stranger lifted his broken blade, his stance steady despite his wounds. He stared straight into the Alpha's glowing eyes, his voice calm, unshaken. I am. The Alpha's growl faltered, and for the first time in its reign, the king of monsters felt something it had never known, fear. The Alpha falls. The ruins were a graveyard of broken stone and broken beasts. The bodies of the fallen pack steamed in the moonlight, their blood seeping into the cracks of the earth. Only two figures remained standing, one a titan of bone and claw, the other a blood-soaked human with a jagged blade clenched in scarred hands. The Alpha roared, its voice splitting the sky, shaking the ground until rubble danced across the ruins. Its glowing eyes burned with fury, its massive body trembling with rage and pain. Black blood dripped from its wounds, but still it stood tall, defiant, unbroken, unwilling to yield. The stranger spat blood onto the ground, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and raised his blade again. His armor was cracked, his body battered, but his stance was steady. His eyes burned cold, like fire locked in ice. The woman's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't tell which of them was the true monster anymore. The Alpha charged, the earth cracked under its weight as it barreled forward, claws slicing through the air with enough force to shred steel. The stranger sprinted to meet it, blade raised. They collided. The impact was an explosion of sound and fury. The Alpha's claw smashed down, the stranger's blade rising to catch it. Sparks showered the night as steel and bone screamed against each other. The ground trembled. Walls collapsed. The ruins groaned under the weight of their battle. The woman clutched her chains, her heart pounding so violently she could barely breathe. Every strike was a world-ending sound, every clash a storm that shook her bones. The Alpha swung again. The stranger ducked low, rolling across rubble, his blade carving into the beast's leg. Black blood sprayed across the stone, sizzling where it touched. The Alpha howled in pain and fury, slamming its tail downward. The stranger leapt aside just in time. The tail smashed the ground where he had stood, collapsing the stone into a crater. Dust and debris filled the air. Through the haze, the Alpha lunged, jaws snapping wide, teeth gleaming like daggers. The stranger didn't retreat. He sprinted forward, straight into the jaws of death. At the last second, he drove his blade upward. Steel split flesh. The jagged edge tore through the roof of the Alpha's mouth and into its skull. The beast screamed, shaking its head violently, trying to throw him loose. The stranger held on. Blood poured over him, hot and suffocating, soaking his armor, burning his skin. Still he drove the blade deeper, his roar matching the beast's as man and monster screamed together. The Alpha slammed its head against the ruins, shaking the stranger loose. He hit the ground hard, the impact rattling his bones. His broken blade clattered across the stone. The woman cried out, terror ripping through her chest. He was unarmed. The Alpha loomed over him, its glowing eyes filled with hatred. It raised its claw high, ready to crush him once and for all. The woman screamed, her voice cracking the silence. No. The Alpha's eyes flicked toward her, and in that heartbeat of distraction, the stranger moved that he grabbed a shard of broken steel from the rubble. His muscles screamed in pain, his body broken, but his will burned brighter than fire. As the Alpha's claw came down, he rolled forward, the shard flashing in his hand. With a roar that shook the night, he drove the jagged steel into the beast's throat. The Alpha froze, its roar died in its chest, replaced by a choking gurgle. Its glowing eyes flickered in shock, in denial. It staggered back, claw clutching at its throat, black blood pouring like a waterfall. The stranger rose slowly, every breath a war of its own. His body trembled, his face streaked with blood, but his eyes never wavered. He wrapped his hands around the shard's hilt and twisted. The Alpha screamed, its final scream, a sound that cracked the night, shaking the forest for miles. The ruins trembled, stones collapsing as the king of monsters thrashed in its death throes. The woman clutched her chains, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking with terror and awe. She couldn't look away. She couldn't even breathe. Finally, with a shudder that shook the ground, the Alpha fell. Its massive body crashed into the ruins, sending dust and rubble flying high into the night. Its glowing eyes dimmed, flickered once, then went out. Silence, The world seemed to hold its breath. The woman stared, her chest rising and falling with ragged gasps. The stranger stood over the Alpha's corpse, his body a shadow drenched in blood and moonlight. He pulled the jagged shard free, letting the monster's black blood gush across the stone that he turned, his eyes locking onto her. For a long moment she couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her lips trembled as she whispered, You killed it." The stranger's voice was low, steady, unshaken. "It was never immortal. Nothing is." He stepped forward, dragging the broken blade behind him, his boots crunching over rubble and bones. The woman pressed herself back against the stone, trembling that he knelt beside her, his scarred hands gripping the chains that bound her. With a single pull, the metal snapped. The woman gasped, staring at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why save me? They left me here. I was nothing but bait." The stranger's eyes burned cold as he met her gaze. His voice cut through the silence like steel. "Because humans don't leave their own. Not anymore." The woman's heart ached at the words. She wanted to believe them, wanted to cling to the fire in his voice. But before she could speak, the ruins groaned, her eyes widened. In the shadows beyond the broken walls, something stirred. Something bigger. The stranger's gaze flicked upward, sharp and unyielding. His grip tightened on the broken blade. The woman trembled, her voice breaking. What is that?" From the darkness, two eyes opened. Larger than the Alpha's. Burning brighter. The night was not over. The revelation, the ruins were still trembling from the Alpha's fall. Its massive body lay broken in the dust, blood steaming in the moonlight. The night should have been silent now, a graveyard of monsters. But the silence was too heavy. Too unnatural. The woman's heart hammered as her trembling eyes shifted to the dark forest beyond the shattered walls. She saw them, two massive, burning eyes opening in the black. Larger than the Alpha's. Brighter. Colder. Her knees gave way. "No, it can't be." The stranger stood tall in the rubble, his broken blade clutched loosely in his hand. His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, but his eyes never blinked. Never wavered. He stared into the dark, unflinching that a growl rolled across the ruins. Low at first, then rising into a sound so deep the ground itself seemed to shake. It was not the roar of a single beast. It was a call. A summons, and in the shadows more eyes opened. One pair. 3. 6. A dozen. The woman gasped, her throat tightening as tears filled her eyes. She clutched the broken chain still hanging from her wrists and whispered, "There are more." The stranger's jaw clenched, but he did not step back. The Alpha had been a king. But kings served crowns. And the one watching now, the one still hidden in the dark, was something far older. Far worse. The woman collapsed against the broken pillar, her voice breaking. "We can't fight that. You can't fight that." The stranger turned his head slightly, his scarred face half lit by moonlight. For a heartbeat, his eyes softened as they met hers. "I already did," he said. "And I will again." The woman's breath caught. He spoke the words like fact, not hope. Like promise, not dream, but deep down she saw it. The weariness in his shoulders, the blood soaking through his armor, the tremble he tried to hide. He was not invincible. He was human, and yet, the growls rose louder, overlapping, filling the night with a chorus of hunger. Shapes began to move in the shadows. Massive figures crawling out from the forest, their glowing eyes burning brighter as they stepped into the ruins. The woman's body shook uncontrollably. She had seen monsters before. She had seen death. But this was different. This was endless. The Alpha had been a nightmare. But this was the abyss itself staring back. She turned to the stranger, her voice cracking. "What? Why are you here? Why save me when you should have run?" The stranger didn't look at her. His gaze never left the monsters crawling into the ruins. Slowly he lifted his broken blade. Blood dripped from its jagged edge. His voice came low, calm, and merciless. "Because I was left behind once too." The woman froze, her lips trembled. She wanted to ask, "Who left you? What? Are you still alive?" But the words died in her throat. The answer was in his eyes. Eyes that had seen betrayal. Eyes that had seen war. Eyes that had chosen to fight anyway. The monsters stepped closer, their growls echoing off the ruins. The ground trembled under their weight. The air grew colder, heavier. The forest behind them seemed to lean forward, as if the whole world was watching. The woman felt despair crash over her. Even if he was strong, stronger than any human she had ever seen, this was too much. No one could survive this. No one could kill them all, but the stranger didn't falter. He rolled his shoulders, tightened his grip on the blade and stepped forward. The woman gasped. "What are you doing?" He glanced at her and for the briefest moment a smile, cold, sharp and dangerous, touched his scarred face, ending this. And then he moved. The monsters roared as one, charging into the ruins like a tidal wave of flesh and claws. Dust and stone exploded into the air as they surged forward. The stranger met them head-on. His broken blade flashed in the moonlight. His roar shook the ruins as he leapt into the storm. The woman screamed his name, though she didn't even know it. Her voice broke into the chaos, carried away by the sound of monsters shrieking and steel ripping through flesh. The night became fire and blood. And in that chaos she realized something terrible and powerful. This wasn't the end of his fight. This was only the beginning.